Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Black MBA Association's Wednesday webinar series. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acquaint you with a few features of this web event technology. At any time, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you may have. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a Q&A window. To submit a question, type your question in the small text box at the bottom, and when finished, click the Send button. You may do this at any time during the program. All questions that you submit are only seen by today's presenters. Questions will be responded to in the order in which they are received and will be addressed at the end of the presentation. However, please note that due to time constraints, our speaker may not be able to respond to all questions submitted. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, Kwame Boler, CEO and co-founder, NEU. He was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey. Kwame was always an entrepreneur at heart, from selling chocolate bars to purchase his first computer to working 3 jobs as an engineering undergrad student or moonlighting his businesses while working full-time as an electrical engineer. Kwame is incredibly driven, diligent, and disciplined. It was these qualities, along with their combined career versatility, strong communication, and leadership skills that allowed Kwame to lead the NEU team as Chief Executive Officer. Kwame's journey with NEU began when he and his co-founders had a joint realization that vacation rentals lacked an industry-specific solution capable of prepping rooms in between guest stays. Frustrated with the status quo, they joined forces. They left their desk jobs and together formed NEU, a marketplace that connected vacation rental hosts with vetted cleaning companies. NEU left the cleaning to the experts, but offered supplementary services, such as providing paper products and linens to streamline the cleaning process. They welcomed their third co-founder, Claudius, to the team, and through use of technology, the 3 were able to increase efficiency by updating hosts with SMS alerts and integrating their calendars to automatically schedule, all while offering fair pricing. These services keep both cleaning companies and hosts dependent on the platform, and with a proven business model, traction, and growth, Kwame, Real One, and Claudius aim to scale up NEU to become a nationally recognized company. Welcome, Kwame. You may begin.
Well, thank you, Megan. You make me sound like I'm an amazing person. I'd like to definitely clarify I'm not all that. And also, thank you all for joining me today. I think this is going to be fun. This is an interesting journey. And I'm excited to have the opportunity to not just get back to the National Black MBA Association, but most importantly, give you guys some insights that I've developed both from pitching in this competition, more specifically the National Black MBA Scale-Up pitch competition, as well as other competitions. So it'll be mainly an opportunity to clarify some insights, lessons learned, and let's begin. So for starters, let's kind of break down how this is going to go. I'm going to begin with a brief introduction. Megan did a phenomenal job of explaining who I am and what we do at NEU, but I'm going to also clarify what's a pitch deck, defining it, and of course talking about some of the use cases. The pitch deck anatomy, which is pretty much something that you'll see consistent with almost every deck, regardless of the size. Some helpful tips going a little bit lower level into some insights as well as some lessons learned. A Q&A session to where I take some questions from you guys on the floor to get a better idea of how I can help, or specifically other things that you would like more insight on. Then I'm going to do my pitch, the same pitch that I did for the National Black MBA Association of last year. And as a disclaimer, I will say that I am not well prepped for it, so I'm probably going to be very rusty on it, and I won't be hitting that 3-minute mark, but I think it'll give you guys a fair idea of what the pitch looks like, at least the mechanics as well, and be able to clarify why I did a lot of the things that I did. And finally, we'll end with some closing remarks, which will probably just be another Q&A regarding the pitch, and finally, just a general thank you for the organization. So on the intro, as Megan indicated, I'm from North New Jersey. I'm actually born and raised. I live currently in Washington. What brought me out here was a job with the Boeing Company. After leaving the Boeing Company, I left to join and create NEU. And I competed originally and was introduced to the National Black MBA Association through the Scale Up Challenge. The first one was held in 2017, which is where my company made it as a semifinalist. We ended up advancing all the way towards the bottom, to where the final 10, and didn't advance to the finals on a split decision. I took a lot of the lessons and feedback that I got from that opportunity, as well as others that I had competed in, to then come back the next year to compete and ended up winning the competition overall. So, what's a pitch deck? A pitch deck is just a brief presentation used to provide your audience with a quick overview of your business plan. For layman's, it's nothing more than your business's resume, so to speak, where the website is the face of your company, your pitch deck is your resume, and your executive summary is your cover letter. So your pitch deck is commonly used in 3 instances or different styles, but you're going to have to make sure that when it comes to pitching, you have an elevator pitch, which is typically less than 90 seconds. For competitions like the Scale Up Challenge, as well as others, you'll see that most of them follow a universal format where it is 3 to 5 minutes long. And that's where you're usually involving not just a talking pitch, which is within the elevator, but you're using pictorials and slides like in a presentation format. And then finally, your investor deck, which is usually considerably more thorough, and that one typically lasts anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. And the reason why almost all of these overlap with each other is that each of these should be incorporated into one another, where your elevator pitch should fall somewhere in between your competitive pitch, and your competitive pitch should fall in your investor pitch. And so all 3 of these pitches should always tie into one another. Now, let's kind of go into the pitch deck anatomy. So, these are more or less the 12 quintessential slides that you'll see within a pitch deck. I'm going to actually try my best to maintain this order within the presentation when I talk about each of these things. But I will give you the disclaimer of saying I didn't follow this verbatim. I ended up stealing this from the internet somewhere, but it was pretty good, and I thought that it would be best to reflect it here. But I do think that for the most part, almost each deck that you'll see will carry these 12 slides. And I also recommend that you have variations of some of these slides to where you can combine a good portion of them. So that way, for more competitive decks, you can convey the same information with a smaller deck in comparison to an investor deck, which you want to make pretty thorough and robust. So, talking about the introduction, this is just an opportunity for you to start telling your story in a sense to where you're describing who you are as an individual, as well as what you're selling and why there's value. Like, without going into detail of discussing the business model or even talking the product, it's the opportunity to let investors know the problem that you're solving. And so it's typically your first slide. Some use it as a cover, but it's a quintessential slide where you want to put your tagline. So that way, as soon as someone opens it, they know exactly what it's about. This is very critical to where you want to also include contact information here. So that way, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they know immediately this is what you're doing and this is how to best reach you. And when you're speaking on this slide, it's also a great opportunity for you to utilize a narrative. The essence of a good pitch deck is that it must flow and tell a story. And the better your deck tells a story, the more likely it is to reach your audience or for them to actually be listening to what you're doing. So outside of the pitch deck or the introduction, another very quintessential slide is going to be the team. So this is where you're conveying your role within the company, as well as each of the key members of the team as well, whether it be co-founders, key employees. It's something that you can use to establish hierarchy. And in terms of its placement within the deck, it doesn't necessarily have to be the second slide. I think it's ultimately dependent on the company itself and how valuable each of the team members are in regards to the problem that you're solving. Like, say, for example, if someone has incredibly strong domain expertise in the area in which you're solving, you're definitely going to want to showcase that as a team, and that is what ultimately sets value in the mind of an investor or a judge or anyone that's trying to listen to you or your target audience, and being able to clearly understand why this is the people that can be able to get the problem done. And again, going back to the placement element. Second, I've seen it done in different ways to where I've seen it done very early, again, with people that have incredibly strong domain expertise, but I've also seen it done towards the end or even in the middle. So it's one of those slides where it should flexibly be placed wherever the narrative makes the most sense. Next is kind of the problem. So this is the slide to where you're painting a picture in the mind of your audience of what's wrong with the status quo, whether it be painful, whether it be a lack of sophistication, whether it be a lack of a technology, and why that technology or lack of technology is painful, whether it be the lack of a physical product. Pretty much you're defining to your audience what's wrong with the status quo and who's afflicted by this problem and why this problem is most importantly painful for them. This slide is very important and should definitely be a slide that's placed towards the beginning, because when trying to provide a narrative that conveys a message to your audience, being able to explain to them very clearly why there's something wrong with the status quo is important. Of course, the next aspect of the problem is often the solution. So the solution slide goes into detail. Like, I've seen a couple of different companies handle this differently. Some people will combine the solution slide with the product slide. I've also seen companies combine the problem side and the solution side to where they talk or give a narrative describing their problem and then talk about the product and how the product can foster and create a solution. In my case with New, I think actually for the Scale Up Challenge, I did combine the problem and solution to one to condense and create a clear narrative. But you can separate them into two distinct slides, and for larger decks, I would actually recommend you do the same. And again, the solution just talks about what opportunity is potentially presented by introducing something that solves the problem that's identified in the slide that you just presented. So problem always follows with solution, and then post-solution often is product. So product's just a slide where you're talking about what you're building or what you've already built. So some people will use this as an opportunity to disclose their MVP and show or their minimum viable product to showcase different uses and how it's being utilized and how it kind of augments the status quo and provides a clear and defined solution. Product can also be a way for you to kind of showcase a good value to what you're doing because it's well defined, especially if you already have users that are currently utilizing the product that have tested and validated the market. And so, again, I've seen, depending on your slide count and where you're trying to kind of roll in the time, depending on which deck that you're trying to best prepare, I've seen companies achieve success combining all three of those slides into one. I've seen companies turn this into two. It's just very important to where you're talking about your product, you're conveying the features that most importantly provide a solution that addresses the problem. Next is traction. This is actually a very critical slide, especially when you're already operating in market. Traction is just something that you would use to validate that the problem is painful by the fact that you're typically scaling at an exponential rate, especially if you're having paid users on your platform or depending on the solution that you're providing. If not technical, it's a good way to validate that there's value in solving the problem that you have. Because if it wasn't painful enough to one person or many people, then there wouldn't be market opportunity. And traction is the easiest way, I guess, to validate that this is actually a problem that is painful to many, and thus a market opportunity that can be seized by introducing funds to solving the problem that you have. the best ways that you can utilize or showcase traction would be doing things like I've seen graphs, I've seen people use downloads. I've also seen, even with Kickstarter campaigns, the fact that people were able to raise funds to solve the problem within short windows of time are all different ways that you can demo and showcase traction at the earliest stage of your company. Next is the market. Now, this is actually a very, very important size because depending on your audience, especially if there are investors in the crowd, the one thing that they're most attracted to is the market opportunity that exists by solving your problem. In other words, how many people find this painful? When you're thinking of TAM and SAM, or your total addressable market and service addressable market, what are the ways and methods that you use to best determine those market sizes? Why is there concrete data that validates that this is actually a problem to them? How do you plan on reaching out to them? Or even just the value that exists in solving the problem. Like, what's the floor? What's the ceiling? How big can this get? Is this $1 billion problem? Is this $1 million problem? Is this a lifestyle business? Is this venture funded? All of those can be very succinctly answered there. When you're even thinking of market opportunity, you also have to typically think of the range and how large you want this product to be, whether it's going to be something that you're introducing into a local city, a municipality, a state, or even country or world. How big is this opportunity? Where is there value in you being able to solve this problem? Why do I care enough? Why is this something that is going to be the next big thing? That's easily described here. When I've listed top down and bottom up, those are just two different approaches that you can take to sizing your market. A top down approach is simply a way in which you look at the maximum amount of people that can use your product. And then you kind of scale down to your market segments. Like a good example would be, I'm creating a product for Uber drivers where by introducing this camera, it can record an incident, and I can introduce a subscription fee of $10 a month. If I wanted to do a top-down sizing of that, I would say that there are I don't know Uber's numbers off the top of my head, but if I was to guess, we have 100,000 drivers within the United States. From the 100,000 drivers, 20,000 would think that a dash cam service could be utilized. From the 20,000 that think a dash cam service that would be useful for them to be able to best protect and save themselves, 10,000 are in a position to where they have a vehicle that's equivalent with the product that we have. And then from the 10,000, we're confident that we can get 2,000 of which because of the competition or competitive landscape. So from that 2,000, they're paying $10 a month. We now have a market size of $200,000 per month, which then translates to 20 or 2.4 million annually. That's how you would do a top-down approach. A bottom-up approach is kind of going from the exact opposite spectrum to where you're thinking, okay, from looking at and analyzing our market and seeing our segments and understanding how many people would be willing to pay this fee, we can concretely define that 2,000 people could potentially utilize this product and see value in it. And from the 2,000 people that see value in it, our total addressable market can be, again, that 2.4 million annually. But the clear distinction, I guess, with the top-down approach versus the bottom-up approach is that the top-down goes all the way from the top of anyone that could potentially be a customer, and the bottom-up approach keeps intrinsic user data based off of who's already either using the product or has desired the product. That makes sense. I think I actually kind of explained that in a convoluted way. But I'm more than happy to kind of clarify that if questions pop up in a later stage, as well as give concrete examples. But now going and getting into the competitive landscape, the competition is actually a very, very, very important slide. Now, most people think that when they're highlighting competition, it means that it devalues the product or the problem that they're solving, but it's actually quite the opposite. I've noticed that more often than not, the more people that they see that are trying or entering the space that you're in, the more value that often exists within the product or the problem that the problem that the product is addressing. The reason being is that the more people that are in the space, the more likely that there's actually a value in the market and being able to solve the problem. And there's different ways that you can actually showcase competition. Like I've seen ways in which people use lists where they detail both the pros of their business in comparison to the cons of their competitors. I've seen ways to where they also kind of use like linear graphs to where they're detailing where the market size is and how much of the market share that you can potentially grab. I've also seen ways to where they're using quadrants to identify why they're the best solution based off of two key features in comparison to the status quo. Each of which is great, but very important and counterintuitive in the sense to where this is the time to where you talk about your competitors and why they're not the best guys in the market and where you are producing the more robust product offering. Next is the business model. So this is actually where you're talking about your business, how it works, and how you monetize. So it's not necessarily detailing the mechanics of the business itself, but more specifically, what were some of the decisions on charging pricing and how you plan to make money through the service or product that you're introducing. And it's pretty critical that you have this as simple as possible. And one of the things that I've also learned is that you don't want to necessarily go so low level to where you talk about every single key feature of how you charge your customer. But more specifically, if there are different ranges, you provide averages. That way an investor can get a better idea of how much money you stand to make for each customer that you onboard. This is also an opportunity to where you can talk about really key things like your long-term value per customer, your customer acquisition costs, each of which are key stats and figures that help them best calculate and determine the opportunity that's presented with you being able to scale your business. Next is usually the ask. So the ask and use of funds slide is where you're asking for a specific amount of money, whether it be something that you would gain from winning the competition or something that you would gain from actually getting an investor to commit to funding your business and showcasing where the money will be utilized, whether it be making strategic hires within your employees, getting more resources, whether by getting consultants, using it and spending it on sponsored ads or marketing dollars. Those are different things that you want to make sure that you detail with a really strong plan. So that way, anyone that's wanting to invest in the company has a very strong idea of what they'll get by doing so. It doesn't always have to be monetary. I've seen a lot of people use the ask slide as a way to ask for help instead of asking for money. And I've also noticed more success sometimes with being able to clarify how you can leverage someone's time and how that could be more useful than sometimes the money that you can receive. And after that, with a go-to-market, this is pretty much taking the details to the next level of how you would incorporate the funds and how they'd be spent. Now, this is a very good slide for people that want to see the game plan. Like, what's your execution strategy once you have the funds, once once you're putting your finger on the green button, how quickly can you scale? How quickly can you grow? And how do you plan on doing that? Like, what is the strategy and what are you expecting to potentially get? And at each point, how do you plan on being able to grow and scale to get more customers or more users onto your platform, product, or service? And yeah, with this slide in particular and a lot of competitions, it's not going to be very critical because you're not going to have an opportunity to usually detail or fully detail a strong go-to-market strategy. In comparison to an investor who will find this very, very important, because then they'll be able to have an vision and plan and see how this can be the next big thing. Then there are projections, which are never really fun for anyone, to tell you the truth. The reason why I say that is because more often than not, most projections are very inaccurate, and you're going to want to make them as accurate as you can. But at the end of the day, they're kind of made up numbers. Some of us have gotten really good at using data to be able to create clear projections that best predict it. But at the end of the day, it's very hard to have or nail these, especially in the early stages of your company. As your company continues to grow and mature, yes, these are going to be held to a higher value. And of course, these are things that, people are going to treat as doctrine. But when your company is really young and you're just at a starting point and you're trying to have a good idea of how big this can be, it's going to be very difficult to accurately get this right. Like I'd say that New is currently 2.5 years old, and we're just getting to a stage where our projections are very accurately reflecting what we're going for and understanding a lot of what's happening and all of the different idiosyncrasies that impact all of the aspects of the projections. And so, again, don't take them too seriously, but try to be as realistic as possible. And a good rule of thumb to think about with it is it's almost good to under-promise and over-deliver. Next is your question slide. Now, this is actually a really good opportunity for you to get a lot of feedback, both from the investor or your audience, and at the same time to address any lingering concerns that they might have had about your business, as well as really paint a picture in their mind of the problem that you're solving. Like, I use questions, especially in competitions, as an opportunity to talk more about my business or to dive deeper on different slides. Also, I'd strongly recommend that for the question slide, it's something that you navigate back and forth to slides and reference material that make sense. Like, I wouldn't stay specifically on this slide. I would go, like, if someone asks you about your projections, you should go to your projections. If someone asks you about your problem, you should go to the problem slide and then discuss it with them. Because then they'll not only have you speaking, but they'll also have the visual cue. And next is contact. Now, again, a lot of these things don't have to necessarily be independent slides themselves, but they can be incorporated in different slides or combined. But it's very critical that you provide a way or method for people to get in touch with you. Like, the whole goal of you having the deck ready is so that people can contact you or get in touch with you to either invest in your business or invest in you as a founder. And I think that would be, it's very, very important that you do incorporate different aspects of this within your deck at the very beginning and the end. Oh, and then on the extra credit, appendixes. Now, on not so important on a competitive or deck, but it can be. Like, I actually did include one in the deck that I used for the National Black MBA, mainly because I thought I would get some questions that could be solved or pointed out through an appendix. But it was something that's very, very critical to a lot of investor decks. And what the appendix is that you're just going to organize a lot of your research and information succinctly. So that way, to someone that isn't very familiar with either the problem or has the domain expertise that you have as a founder, would be able to get a breadth of information outside of the deck. Like, the deck itself, you want to kind of try to make it as concise and as clean as possible. And your appendix is like your extra credit section, to where if someone's really invested and wants validation that this is a problem, they can go through it and see case studies, research, testimonials, user findings, anything under the sun that just clearly defines that what you're solving has strong value, and you can validate that it's incredibly painful. It's also really good for you to have a bibliography as well, because the bibliography will provide you or provide the audience with the opportunity of understanding that you have validated sources, because the research is there, it's clear, it's given, and it's not just coming from opinions of yourself, but they're coming from third parties, which thus makes it a lot easier when it comes to validating both your market size and the opportunity that comes with solving the problem. Now, I wanted to take this opportunity to give you guys some helpful tips as well as some lessons learned that I adopted from all of the competitions that I've been involved in, as well as by being a founder and pitching to different VCs as well as in different scenarios. So, hands down, rule of thumb is you definitely want to keep it simple. The reason why you want to make sure that your deck is as simple or your presentation is as simple as it possibly can be is that as a founder or business owner, it's hard to keep into consideration that your audience might be hearing this for the first time. As in, they might never have heard what your problem is. They might never have heard of the opportunity that's presented by your problem. And of course, if those two are true, they don't know your business, they don't know your competitors, and that doesn't mean that they're not a person that isn't willing to become educated. It just means that this is now an opportunity for them to learn. And with that in mind, you're going to want to simplify things as much as you possibly can. Also, you want to simplify things because you don't want to necessarily overshare or give too much information. Like there's a fine line between like giving trade secrets as well as being able to convey your point. And it ultimately just comes down to how complex the problem is and what you're solving. But in almost 99% of cases, you're going to have to be able to simply explain what you do. And that entails being able to keep it as comprehensive and least complex as possible. Like hands down, like the analogy of if a 5-year-old can get it, it's good, is something that you should keep into consideration here. And the same thing on slide effects. Like you don't want to do any form of slide effects within your deck at all. They're often distracting, they're confusing, they can go wrong, tenfold on the competition, but even more so on the investor. Like you want people to be focused on you as a speaker and the information behind you. Another thing that I didn't add to this, or two other things that came to mind, is that you want to avoid text or too much text. Too much text in the deck can kill it. I think I want to say that if you Google like the 30-20-10 or 30-20-15 rule, you'll be able to find something that talks about the rules of ratio of text and font sizes and why that's really critical. Because if there's too much information that's being packed into a slide that doesn't have a really smooth, uniform flow, again, it could be really distracting and it could prevent people from getting it. And again, and most importantly, you also don't want to be reading from your deck. You want to have a conversation. You want to have people feel organic. You don't want to be in a position to where they're more focused on the presentation itself instead of the presenter. Avoid red. This is actually something that came to me as feedback from a couple other founders as well as some different organizations that I'm in. Red sends a pretty negative message, and you want to just keep positive thoughts embedded within your deck at all times. And so even when you're talking about different competitors as well as other things, that the problem space as well, there's different ways or color schemes that you can display the problem and from a negative light without using the color red. Like grayscale is something that's very, very helpful as well. I'd also strongly recommend that you avoid the inclusion of videos. Videos are very distracting, and there's tons of room for error. It also makes the size of your deck a lot larger, and in doing so, it can make it easier for you to be able to share the material or information, which is a pro and a con. But the most important aspect of the deck itself is the presenter, and you want to be able to ensure that everyone is very keenly focused on everything you're saying and why it's important, instead of being distracted by a video. I've seen sometimes that those of us who are nervous and wanting to ensure that they get every aspect of it perfect want to default to a video. But at the end of the day, it's that human interaction. As cheesy as it sounds, it's got to be as organic as it possibly can be. And you're going to want to make sure that you can convey your message as succinctly as possible. So now let's go into lessons learned. I think that I've achieved the most success through competitions by just practice. Like, I practice a lot. I think I cheat by practicing. And I mean that. Like, to give you like an example, one of the competitions that I was involved in was the elevator pitch. And that was sponsored by a local news or a national news network called Geekwire. And for me to get a better understanding of what it would take to actually pitch on an elevator, because that was the gimmick of the competition. You had to actually pitch on the elevator, and it was 48 seconds or 42 seconds to go up. And to make sure that I got the timing right, I worked and practiced, and I realized this doesn't make sense. Like, I'm gonna try to get 42 seconds right, but it might not feel the same way when you're riding in the elevator. So I simply just went to the exact same elevator, showed up, and practiced. And I rode up and down the elevator several times, saying my pitch privately until I could get it right. And that was one of my secrets to where I was able to convey, and I was able to get the timing right and understand and become more comfortable in the space. I did the same exact thing with the National Black MBA Association, where for both competitions, I made sure that I went into the rooms to where the finals and semifinals were held. That way I can practice, understand the acoustics, get very comfortable in my surroundings, and have it feel more natural to where the timing was perfect. And that's an incredibly critical aspect of this, because in the competitive space where timing is really, really key, you're going to want to make sure that you practice and get every sound right, every syllable correct, just so that way you can ensure that your audience understands everything that you're trying to say. Same thing with the, I've learned also to ask, never assume, mainly due to the fact that when I'm saying that, I'm thinking, talk to your audience. Like, when you're pitching from people, don't assume that they comprehend everything that you're saying. Get into an effort of being able to accept criticism, even from those who are not as sophisticated, because they bring value. Going back again to the analogy of if the 5-year-old can get it, it works. That's a very strong lesson learned. One of the bigger takeaways I took from 2017 versus 2018 was that I got very comfortable pitching to an extremely technical audience. And with me being technical myself, it became my bread and butter. In 2017, I had a panel of judges that weren't very technical. And thus, not only was I not speaking to the right audience, but they didn't get the problem, and thus they couldn't fairly evaluate it. And that was my fault. If I had done a better job of ensuring that a wider range of audience could understand what we were building, then instead of assuming that because I speak well and I'm articulate and technical and that everyone in this industry is business-minded and sophisticated, I probably would have done better, but you never know. Next was, it's always business, never personal. Like, one of the bigger things that I learned from the competitions, and it kind of ties into the next one, which is it's objective, not science, is that you should never take how you do personally. It's really hard. Many of these people that are competing in this space deserve to be there just as much as you do. And if someone doesn't get your problem, it's not their problem, it's your problem. You have to use this as a learning opportunity to make sure that you're evolving, so that way you can grow as both a presenter as well as a founder, and ensure that everyone can clearly understand the value of what you're selling. And going back to business, never personal, you want to make sure that you remain professional at all times, due to the fact that this community is very tight-knit and incredibly small. And it's also critical that you remain on good terms with everyone that you interface with in these competitions, because I guarantee you, for probably at least 3 or 4 of them, it's not going to be the last time you see them. Through competing both times, I actually got a wealth of information and connections to all the semifinalists, and even some of those that were before the semifinalists, or I guess that would be the quarterfinalists. And it was a wealth of network. And had I gotten, arrogant or, focused or responded smoothly, I wouldn't have been able to leverage the relationships that I had with those people outside of the competition. The competition itself is collectively no more than 2 days. In comparison to the lifetime of your business, it's a large sacrifice to make. So always remain professional, always be cordial, and never take anything that happens personally. And going back to the subjective aspect again, that's the nature of competitions themselves. A big lesson learned for me, and also something that was very humbling for me, is that although New won the 2018 Scale Up Challenge, we did not win the People's Choice Award. And so if the audience was voting, there would have been a different company that ended up winning that competition. And so keeping that into consideration, there's no 100% guarantee. So just as there's no guarantees in life, there's no guarantees in this competition. So if you choose to compete, even just here, as well as pitch to different people, understand that you're going to be in a position to where people won't get it. And so the better or easier you make your pitch, or more comprehensive you make it, the more success you'll probably have. Like, don't hate, definitely appreciate. Use it as a networking opportunity, because you never know who you can connect with, who will be in the crowd, and how they can be there, or how they can be of help to you in your business at later points in time. Smile. Always have fun. Like, don't try to get too stressed out by this. These opportunities can be incredibly stressful because you're going to be in front of hundreds of different people sometimes, but try to just, keep the calm, control the nerves, and have fun with the experience, because once it's over, it's over. And finally, you never know. I like to think that, not just from thinking, you never know who's in the crowd, or you never know what can come from the opportunity. Don't use the fear of losing as a way or opportunity for you to thwart it from doing it again. Like, we went into the first competition of the Scale Up Challenge very arrogant, actually, mainly because in most of the local pitch competitions that I had competed in, and even some of the ones that were national, I'd always made it as a finalist to the end. And I assumed that it would be the exact same thing with the Scale Up Challenge. And it was very humbling for me not to do that. And so it was a very major learning and growth opportunity. And I almost didn't compete in the second one, just because I realized how challenging it was the first time around and how competitive it was the first time around. It was pushed to do so both by my founders and because I conveniently happened to be in LA the same time of the quarterfinals. And because of that, it created opportunity. So don't ever allow the fear of losing or it not being worth your time to discourage you from making the investment in both yourself and jumping into the opportunity. So now I'd like to leave it to Megan. I think there's a couple of questions that are coming into the floor. I'd be more than happy to answer anything that you guys have for me at this point.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just as a quick reminder, the Q&A is located in the right-hand side of your screen. To submit a question, just type your question into the small text box and hit the send button or press enter. Okay, so it looks like our first question says, under what circumstances might it be suggested that your ask be partly contingent on your first-year performance?
Under what circumstances might it be suggested that your ask be partially contingent on your first-year performance? Incredibly rare. Very, very rare, mainly because more often than not, most founders, when they're asking, they're usually asking for 18 to 24 months runway. And if you're a post-revenue, as in if you're a company that's already earning capital, it's going to, like, you can factor in your revenue and your revenue growth into your ask, but I'd actually highly advise that you don't. I'd figure out what some of your reoccurring costs are, more specifically, what your largest reoccurring costs are outside of the founding team, and figure out what those will be for the 18 to 24-month period, or anywhere from 12 to 24 months, with a very strong milestone that's geared towards it. And that's kind of how you can define your ask.
Okay, great. Our next question said, how did winning the competition help you scale financially and network-wise? What cities does your company operate in now?
Actually, New only operates in Seattle. So it didn't allow us to scale into other markets, but it significantly helped us scale within the market that we were in. We were able to triple our team size because of the capital that we had brought in, which allowed us to focus a lot more on scaling into more homes. So that influx of capital was very helpful. Also, when you're holding a check that has like $50,000 on it, it definitely gets a lot more attention. Because I was simultaneously involved in a couple of different competitions, it was interesting in the sense to where they were cross-promoting the fact that we had won the scale-up challenge. Like GeekWire had done an article about us being a winner, and then that was followed by Afrotech. Black Enterprise was in the crowd, and so Black Enterprise ended up doing an article on us as well. So thank you to all of them. And that was just that ended up creating some momentum for our company. So if you're in a position to where you want to fundraise, that can actually be a really strong FOMO element or fear of missing out element that could potentially convince investors to pull the trigger. But I would highly advise that, you're already in a position to where you sat down with investors, you're not asking for funds, you're asking for advice, you're creating a very strong mailing list, you're sending an email once every month consistently at the same time, and then use an event like winning a competition like this as a trigger or catalyst for them to pull the trigger on investing and scaling your business.
Okay, thank you. So this question says, how did you answer the what will you do with the $50K investment if you win question?
I kept it simple. I just mainly clarified that I would use it to scale the company. I said that right now we're in a position to where we have limited staffing. And by getting the $50,000, we could hire more people, which then could allow us to bring on more customers, which could then accelerate the rate in which we can scale into other cities and introduce more opportunity.
Great, thank you. Okay, so it looks like this is our last question. It says, how do you effectively present about the competition when there is no competition?
Ooh, there's always competition. And even if you think there's no competition, there is competition, because if there wasn't competition, then in theory, a problem couldn't exist. Like when I'm thinking about that, I'm saying specifically that what is the customer user doing right now to assuage the pain that they're doing? So what is their current method that your problem best addresses? So even the competition could even be the user. Like in my case, when I'm thinking of competition, I can go as granular to saying Molly Maids, which really isn't, like, Molly Maids, by the way, is a franchise cleaning business, which isn't very much involved in the Airbnb space, but they could be. So anyone that could do what you're doing can be established as competition. So you can go as secular as, I'm going to the local cleaner market who are currently cleaning Airbnbs for hosts and being able to detail how they're solving the problem. So I rethink your frame of thinking. And when you're assuming that there's no competition, maybe start thinking about how how the status quo is currently addressing the problem.
All right, thank you. So I think we have time for one more question. It says, on the pitch stage, do you believe it is better to go broad or go deep? Examples, expand into new markets or further grow your current market?
I think it's smarter to go realistic. So $50,000 is not a lot of money, at least in the scape, or at least when you're trying to cartelize what you can do for your business. It's good to paint the vision of what the company can be if the company reaches success, but it's also realistic to clearly define how the money can be utilized to advance growth at a realistic level.
All right. Well, that is all of our questions. So I'll just give it back to you for some closing remarks, and then we can finish out the webinar.
So we have 5 minutes left, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to do. One thing that was the next on this was I actually did have my pitch for the Scale Up Challenge that's integrated into this. Now, again, it's going to be rusty. I'm going to try my best. I don't think it's going to be the 3-minute mark, but we will see. And so let's begin. The world's largest hotel chain lacks a turnkey solution to match its growth, at least not until now. Hi, my name is Kwame Boler. I'm the CEO and co-founder of New. So picture this. You're an Airbnb host with a second home downtown. Well, it's 11 o'clock and your guests just checked out. And just like a hotel, you're going to have to make sure the place is clean, the linens are stocked, and the toiletries are restocked. A little difficult to do before 4 p.m., which is when your next guest checks in, and especially if you happen to work a 9 to 5 and vacation regularly. And that's where we come in. So New streamlines hotel-style cleans for Airbnbs. We provide a turnkey experience by scheduling cleans between guest stays and supplying sheets, towels, and toiletries. The service begins with touch of a fingertips. The host integrates their Airbnb into our platform, and we automatically schedule and dispatch cleaners that are licensed, bonded, insured, and background checked, with backpacks carrying the sheets, towels, and supplies catered to each apartment, and they service the apartments in between. The host gets a notification as soon as the job is marked complete, and there's strong value to both sides of the market segment. The opportunity to solve this problem is huge. We sized the market, Reuters sized the vacation rental market to well over $168 billion. And just from there, with 100 million stays each year, we're confident that the problem we're solving can grow to a $2.4 billion market opportunity with $50 million in Seattle alone. The business model is simple. We have a sliding scale business model with a split rev share. Cleaners earn for each job that's done, and depending on the size of the property, parking, and other options, the hosts pay more per transaction. This translates to closer to 87/40 per turnover, with a 55/45 split between cleaner and new. This has proven to be a very viable business concept because to date we've done over 4,000 transactions and been in over 80 homes. We've grossed over $200,000 all in effort of validating this problem, and the competition pales in comparison to the robust product offering that New has. It's like Goldilocks, where the bed that's too soft uses software and doesn't have the same toiletries or supplies, where the bed that's too hard are the ones that use employees as agents and thus aren't very scalable. We're the team to do it because all of us have a strong background and domain expertise here. My co-founder, Rowan, and I were both hosts, and Claudius brings the technical versatility that best complete the package. What's awesome is that the social impact on this is phenomenal. New as a mission empowers individuals and small businesses to make life easier. We're operating in a space where we're disrupting the socially disenfranchised by providing higher paid opportunities to women and people of color in comparison to other industries within the gig economy. And the projections on this are phenomenal. We project that with the right investment opportunity and scaling at the same growth that we're at, that by Q3 of next year, we'll be in a position where we'll be able to operate profitably and push out a new city month over month. Today, I'm here to ask for $50,000, of which we'll be able to spend entirely on mainly market growth and expansion by tripling our team size. That will allow us to plateau and get our business to the next heights. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your questions. So that kind of more or less wraps up this. I did want to have an opportunity to kind of potentially take one question, but I think we might be over time. One thing I wanted to note is that I did include an appendix in this, but I didn't actually use the appendix during the presentation itself. But this is just like an example of ways that I validated that the problem is actually a problem and the status quo, like what other people were doing to solve it, and then cited all the sources that I used to best define this. That's my email. And so for those of you who want to just get in contact with me or ask me any other questions, that's the easiest way to reach me. It's kwame@newcleans.com. And again, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the National Black MBA Association, also FedEx, who sponsored the Scale Up Challenge. I really appreciated all the insight and learnings that I took from this. And hopefully I benefited some of you in this room, or hopefully all of you in this room with the information that I shared. So thank you most importantly for your time.
All right. Thank you so much. And just to answer a couple of questions, I've been asked if this is going to be available for access afterward. And Kwame, I'm not sure if you know the answer to that, but I think it will be made available on the National Black MBA Association's website in the next couple of days. So, does that sound right?
You're absolutely
okay.
You're absolutely right, Megan. I have no idea.
Okay.
So hopefully that is the case.
Yes, I think it is. But thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. And on behalf of NBMBAA, I would like to thank our presenter for a great program and for you, the audience, for your participation in today's event. This concludes today's program. Thank you so much and have a great day.